Hello, Bamp here, and today we are talking about pinning tweezers and how you can make your own using a few simple tools. Pinning tweezers can be very helpful because, for example, when I pick up a pin like this, there's a little notch in the tweezer and it allows you to have that stability to hold on to that pin. It's going to keep its orientation. It's going to hold on fairly smoothly and securely. You can see here, this is a pair I just made. It's holding onto that pin. I'm not going to knock it around. Whereas if I take, for example, these, which have not been modified yet, you can see I put that pin in there and it moves all around. And so what I'm going to do today is just show you some simple techniques using a rotary tool such as a Dremel, but you could also do this with a file. It'll just take a little bit longer. So we'll go through that with you in a moment. Now, before we start here, let's talk a little bit about safety. I have my rotary tool here. The first thing is do not plug it in unless you're ready to use it. We are cutting metal. Metal is harder than people, so you want to be very careful. And today we're going to be using a few tools here. We got a rotary tool. You need a collet wrench for your rotary tool. And these are just a couple of little grinding wheels for it. All of this can be purchased online or at a local hardware store. So again, with this, you want to really be sure before you power it up that you're ready. You want to keep your hands clear of all the cutting bits at all times. You want to wear eye protection. That means safety glasses or a face shield. And also we're going to be making some metal dust. So you may want to think about wearing a dust mask or respirator, making sure to have adequate ventilation because that's really not stuff you want to be breathing in. So I'm going to get this set up and we'll go through the first stages of preparing those tweezers. So again, I'm unplugged here. I'm inserting my bit. There's a little lock button here to secure the collet while we turn, and we're going to snug that up. So I've decided that the tweezers that I'm going to use out of this set, which is a very cheap set I got actually at a local store called Harbor Freight. It was about $5, so basically $1 for a pair of tweezers. You can find this online also. And these are kind of thin at the front, almost too thin to really use a pin adequately if I grab one. And you can see here, I probably want to go back just a little bit before I make my grind outs. I do have enough thickness in here that I can go back. So what I'm actually going to do first is take a little cutoff wheel and just cut this off, and then we'll clean up that metal later. So what I'm going to do is take my rotary tool here, and again, not plugged in yet, and I've got a little metal cutting wheel here, a cutting disc, and the thing to be really careful with these is they can break off. So you want to sort of think about the trajectory if that breaks off, and really just be careful. So now I've got my face shield and I'm putting that down right now. And now I'm going to plug in my tool. And I'm coming right over here, and I'm actually, so this tool, and you'll be able to see, has an arrow of rotation. So this tool is rotating this direction. I want to make sure that my work is always being pulled down and or away from me. If it's being pushed towards me, the risk is something could break off and fly right at me, or I could lose control of this and it flies right at me. So I always want to be below the center line of this disc. And I'm actually going to use the table to help stabilize my hand. If you have a mount for this, like a vise mount, that's even better. So we're going to turn the tool on, and I'm just going to cut off now. Okay, and you see I've cut through right there. Let me get this mask up. And I've also just unplugged my tool just for safety. You don't want this thing running around. And you can see now I've got my cuts in the end here. And it's pretty good. It's a little rough on the edges, so you want to be careful not to cut yourself. And we'll clean that up with a grinding wheel in a moment. But now we've got sort of a nice little area where we can cut out our pinning area. Now, you can see there's kind of a bow in this. If you wanted, you could put that in a vise and sort of bend it a little bit. straightened it out, but I think it's going to work just fine because we're going to make that little cutout right in the end there. So now what I'm going to do is take out this cutting wheel, and I'm going to put in my little grinding bit right here. So now I've got my grinding bit in here, and this is just a conical bit. It's worn down a little bit in the middle, or on the end rather, because I've been using it a lot for making things like this, pinning tweezers and challenge locks and things, and it's actually become much more circular. If you can find a tiny little circular one, all the better. But the most common will have a little bit of an angle in it. And so what I'm going to do here is I am going to get my Dremel plugged in here. Again, eye protection on. And I want to just sort of dry run practice it and say, okay, where am I making that little cutout? I want it as pretty close to the edge as I can get. I don't want to scallop out the edge. I want to make sure I have that full circle in there. So I'm thinking right about here, if you can see that. And so what I'm going to do is turn on my Dremel, and then I'm going to touch this very lightly to the edge. Now, it's good to have something like a little cup of water to cool off this metal. So you might go and grind a little bit and then cool, grind and cool. You don't want it to get super hot. You certainly don't want it glowing hot, because you'll actually ruin the temper of the metal and you can make it very soft or brittle. So I'm going to start here and actually give my tweezers a little dip in the water. I'm going to turn on the tool and then just touch it to the edge and line it up where I want it and make a very light pressure. Very light pressure. Let the abrasive of the wheel do the work. So we're going to turn that on, and then we'll check and see if we're in the right spot. Okay, and so I've done a little light pressure, and I'm not sure if you can see here, but there's a little notch forming right at the edge, so I like that. I'm going to keep going. Okay, and it's probably getting warm, so I'm going to dip in my water. And I've seen people do this where it gets so hot that it's actually boiling the water. And now you can see I've just forming a bit of a notch. Hopefully you can see that over there. And so we're going to keep going with it. Now this is slightly conical, so I'm going to keep going with it, but then I'm going to flip this over so that I can even it out. And at the end, if there's any sort of aberration or abnormality, we can take a round file and run that through here. And again, all of this can also be done with files. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. Okay, so I dipped that in my water, and I'm just going to wipe it off for a second here. And hopefully you can see we've got our little notches in the end now, and I'm just going to try that with our pins. Just remember, this might be a little warm, so make sure to dip and try it. So you can see now I've got my pin. It fits in there in the end very well, and it's nice and secure. Now we've still got some kind of sharp squared edges, so we're going to take care of that in a second. But you can see I've got that pin I can pick up. This is the end pin from the end cap of a Schlage lock. I've got a little spring here, and it just makes it really nice to align things when you're putting it in that lock. You can see I can pick up this pin with very little effort, and if I put that in and had to put that in the lock, we could do that. And of course, if you want to change the angle of this or anything like that, it's really not a problem. So what I'm going to do now, because I like that profile and I like what I have there, is I'm going to round off the end here and just clean it up a bit. So what I'm going to do is change from this bit. So remember, we're unplugging our Dremel in between just to make sure that we don't do anything dangerous. And I'm just going to take out this bit, and I'm going to put in a excuse me, a round grinding wheel like this here. So I got my wheel on there, and what I'm just going to do is, again, with the direction of turn so that we're pulling the piece away from us, not shooting it towards us, I'm just going to round off the tip there. And if you had sort of a sharp edge in here, right by where the pin would go, so we don't mar anything. Sometimes I like to just touch the edge there, just to round it a bit. So we'll just go through that right now. Okay, and you can see now I've pretty much removed my sharp edges. On that side, we'll go for this side now. And I've got my edges off of there. I also just kiss the edge of this just to get it a little bit less sharp, and really a nice space there for our pins. And I'll come here, I'll pick one up for you. You can see the pin fits in there pretty nicely, not really moving around, and so that should really help you control that pin when you're repinning, you're moving things around. It's really easy to just put this down, get those pins in the right spot, or get springs in the right spot. Like I said, this can be done with all sorts of different tweezers. This was out of a phone repair kit. This is probably one of my favorite pairs, actually. I use this all the time. And all different types are acceptable. This one is a reverse action, so it holds on to those pieces. It's a little bit thick here, but you could just grind that down a little bit thinner, either with your Dremel wheel or on sort of a belt sander, something like that. And so really, not a crazy project. I think this took me probably less than 10 minutes to do. If you're doing this with a file, it's going to take you a bit longer, and you can do that with either just like a micro round file. This is actually a small chainsaw file. That works really well. I use this also for impressioning and stuff, and I can show you here. That'll fit in that profile really well. Or you could go back to your small file set, and there should be a round file in there that you can use. And you just kind of go slow, and especially when you're using a rotary tool like this, really you want to be going slow, because sometimes it'll take off a lot of metal, and especially with sort of the more inexpensive tweezer sets, it's not going to be really necessarily good quality metal, and it may come off really fast, faster than you think. So if you have any comments, questions, suggestions of a process, how you do it, or projects you'd like to see in the future, please let us know. And again, this has been OpAmp with Lockpickers United. If you want to see more Locksport videos, please subscribe below, and thanks for watching.